Ian wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws, plays an island, and passes. Fred's got a Hallowed Fountain for turn, which he has come in tapped, and passes as well. Maximus draws, and plays a Rustfilled Bridge, passing to me. I've got a Forest, and I cast Reese the Redeemed, and pass back to Ian. Ian plays a Botanical Sanctum, and pays 2 for a Sword of the Anime. Fred draws, plays a Plains, and casts his own Sword of the Anime, and passes after that. Maximus has a Command Tower for turn, and pays 2 for a Wishclaw Talisman. I draw, play an Arid Mesa, and crack it, losing 1 for a Plains. I also cast Nature's Lore, going to find a Temple Garden. Moving to combat, I poke Max for 1 with Reese, and pass after that. Ian draws, plays a Forest, and passes. Fred's turn has a Mountain coming in, and he's got enough mana to cast Captain America. He goes to combat, and Captain America triggers, letting Fred equip the Sword of the Anime onto him for free, and passes after that. Maximus draws and then activates his Wishclaw Talisman, going to find a card and donating the artifact to Ian. He finds a card, and Max then plays a Mountain for turn. He casts Sting and passes. I draw, play Black Panther, and put a +1/+1 counter onto one of my lands. I then go to combat, poking Ian for 1 with Reese the Redeemed. I pass after that. Ian draws and plays a Forest, and then activates the Wishclaw Talisman and gives it back to Max. He goes to tutor for a card, and unsurprisingly casts a Ristic Study, and passes once it resolves. Fred draws and plays a Prairie Stream, and then casts Bilbo's Ring, paying the 1 for the study. Going to combat, Fred gets to move the ring onto Captain America thanks to his trigger, and he swings at me for 5. Fred gets to draw a card and lose a life, and go and find a land from the Sword of the Anime, and I then take the hit, and he passes after that. Max draws and plays a Phyrexian Tower as his land for turn, and casts Saravok's Tome. He gains the initiative, and as he enters the Undercity, goes to grab a Plains to put to hand. He then casts Felwar Stone, and passes. I draw and go to combat, and I hit Max with Black Panther to gain the initiative. This has me going into my library, and I grab and reveal a Plains, which I then play for turn. I then also cast a Sylvan Library, paying the 1 for Ristic Study, and pass. Ian draws and casts a Quandrix Cultivator, and as it comes in, finds an island. He then plays an island from hand, and he passes to Fred after that. Fred's turn has a Plains coming in, and he casts Robe of the Archmagi. He moves to combat, and puts the robe onto Captain America, and he swings him at me. This has Fred going to find a basic again, drawing a card and losing a life, and I then take the hit for 5. This has Fred taking the initiative, and draws 5 cards from the robe. After that, Fred plays a Goblin Engineer, and goes to find the Sword of Feast and Famine, and puts it to his graveyard. Max draws and casts Jansen, and activates the Wishclaw Talisman, sacrificing it to Jansen with the ability on the stack. This has Max making 2 constructs, and then going to tutor for a card. He plays an Ancient Den for turn, and then moves Sting onto his commander. Max then moves to combat, untapping Jansen, and swings him at Fred, connecting and taking back the initiative. This has Max scrying 2 as he moves further into the Undercity, and he passes after that. I draw and cast a Hardened Scales, and then play Hall of Heliod's Generosity. I follow it up by casting a Generous Gift, and take out Captain America, and I then go to combat. Max gets to untap Jansen, and I pass turn after that. Ian draws, playing a Forest for turn, and casting Soul Ring. He then casts Neoform, sacrificing the Quandrix Cultivator. This has him tutoring from his library onto the field a Mind Flayer, which as it comes in, takes the Goblin Engineer.
To be fair, I really don't like it when people steal my commander, so I'll steal the Goblin Engineer, just on principle.
Yeah,
that's fair,
respect
because that drives me insane.
Yeah.
And then follows up with a Trigon Prime. Ian then plays a Simic Signet, and announces he'll move to combat, which has Max sacrificing a construct token to make 2 treasure tokens before untapping Jan as we move to Ian's combat. Ian then passes through his phases and passes turn to Fred. Fred draws and casts a Jessica's Will, getting 6 red mana. He uses some of it to recast Captain America, paying the 1, and then casts the Reaver Cleaver, not paying the 1. Fred then continues with Mother of Ruins, and he goes to combat. This is Max turning a treasure into 2 constructs with Jansen, and then untapping him. Fred then moves the Robe of the Archmagi onto Captain America with his own trigger, and he passes. During his end step, Max turns a construct token into 2 treasures, and we move to his turn. Max moves further into the Undercity, goading Captain America, and then drawing for turn. He plays a Plains, and casts Breach the Multiverse. This has us all milling our top 10, and he gets a Goblin Welder, Seraph, Arasta, and Loshil off of it. Once that's done, he sacrifices a construct token to the Phyrexian Tower, and this allows him to prototype cast a Goring Warplow. Max then draws a card from Loshil, and he follows up with Caretaker's Talent. He then sacrifices his last construct token, making 2 more treasures, and drawing a card from the talent. Max then moves to his combat step, untapping Jansen, and passing after that. I draw, and use my library trigger, and take an extra 4 to keep an extra card. I then pass turn, and as we move through my phases, Max sacrifices a treasure to make 2 construct tokens, and draws a card off the talent and the Loshil as we move to my combat step. Ian draws and plays a Patriarch Seal, and then brings out Prime Speaker Vannifar. He moves the Sword of the Animist onto the Mind Flayer, and he goes to combat. Before letting him do so, Max creates 2 more construct tokens and then gets to untap his Jansen, and Ian then moves to combat and declares that he's swinging the Mind Flayer and Trigon Prime at me. Ian makes the Mind Flayer unblockable with the Trigon Prime trigger, and before moving to blocks, I cast March of the Multitudes, putting 5 into the X, as Ian goes to find a land. I then chump the Trigon Prime, but take the 6, and Ian passes. Fred draws and casts Sigarda's Aid, and then plays out Training Grounds. He equips the Reaver Cleaver onto Captain America, and he goes to combat. And Max once more uses Jansen to make some treasure tokens, and draws some cards from the talent and Loshil. Fred then moves Bilbo's Ring onto Captain America, and he flashes an Excalibur, and gets to free equip it onto Captain America thanks to Sigarda's Aid. Fred then swings Captain America at Ian since it's goated, and Ian can't block, taking 15 commander damage. Fred also gets to lose a life and draw a card from Bilbo's Ring first, and then draws 15 cards from the Robe trigger, and makes 15 treasures from the Reaver Cleaver trigger. After combat, Fred plays a slew of mana rocks with Felwar Stone, Talisman of Conviction, and Soul Ring. And he then puts a Mantle of the Ancients onto Captain America, and brings back even more equipment onto him, including Champion's Helm, Grafted Exoskeleton, and Sword of Feast and Famine. Fred continues his turn with a Stonehewer Giant, and then plays out SRAM. He passes, and during his end step, Max makes a construct token by sacrificing a treasure. On Max's upkeep, Fred throws Excalibur at Max with Captain America, trying to kill him with infect damage. Max responds by activating Goblin Welder and targets the exoskeleton and one of Fred's artifacts in his graveyard. Fred responds to this, flashing in Row of Stars. With the robe on the stack, Max responds by casting Smoke Bomb to give everything Shroud so he can't get equipped. Fred responds to this, throwing Embercleave at Max's face, which Max responds to by untapping the Goblin Welder with Seraphon, and then activating it to weld away the exoskeleton again. No one else has any responses at this point, so the exoskeleton gets swapped for a Rustvale Bridge, and Fred is forced to sacrifice Captain America, but does draw off SRAM. Max then finally resolves the initiative trigger, drawing a card and then drawing a card for his turn. He sacrifices his Goring Warplow to the Phyrexian Tower, and then casts a Skull Clamp. Max then sacrifices the smoke bomb to Jansen, making 2 more construct tokens, and then clamps 3 constructs to draw 6 cards. Max then attempts to cast Ephemerate on Jan, with Fred responding by casting Pongify and takes his commander out. Max then continues by playing an Isolated Chapel, and he cashes in his treasures to help cast Ashnod's Altar. Max then sacrifices the frog from Pongify to the Ashnod's Altar to use the mana to clamp another construct. Max also has made a spider from Erastus seeing the Pongify, and he sacrifices it to help cast Capitoline Triad. He follows it up with his own Excalibur, and he then goes to combat. He swings everything at Fred, who blocks Arasta with the Stonehero Giant, Loshil with the Elephant, and 2 constructs with Mother of Ruins and Sram. Before damage, Max makes the emblem from the Capitoline Triad, gaining the emblem to pump all of his creatures up, and Fred loses his creatures and then takes 9 to the face. After combat, Max casts Liquid Metal Torque, and then plays a 1000-Year Elixir. I draw and play Osier Tack, and then go to combat. I swing my 4 soldier tokens at Fred, dealing 4 and gaining 4, and with nothing else, I pass to Ian. Ian draws and plays a forest, and then casts a Bramble Sovereign. He follows it up with an Endraiser Forerunners, and makes a copy of it with the Bramble Sovereign as it comes in. This has the copy gaining no pumps, the original gaining a pump, and everything else gaining 2 pumps. He then swings everything at Max, making the Forerunner unblockable with his Trigon Prime. Max responds before damage, sacrificing a construct to make 2 mana, and untaps the Goblin Welder with a 1000-Year Elixir. Max then activates it, welding away his Ancient Den to bring back Dracnian. The Dracnian exiles the unblockable Forerunner as it comes in, and Max then blocks the Endraiser Forerunner copy with the Capitoline Triad, but takes the rest. This is Ian gaining the initiative, grabbing a land, and passing. Fred draws and plays Castle Vantress, and then recasts Captain America. He moves Excalibur onto him, and unequips it to deal 6 to Max and 6 to Ian. Fred is then able to repeatedly equip and throw it for a reduced cost because of Training Grounds, dealing 6 to Ian and I, and then does it 2 more times to win the game. This video is brought to you in part by my sponsors. Card Conduit is the easiest way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether your collection is sorted or not, there's an option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% higher than just using one buy list, you can rest assured you get the best bang for your buck, and you can get further savings of 10% on your service fees by using my affiliate link down below or the promo code MTGMudsta. 401 Games is Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. With a huge selection of cards and sealed product, first-time buyers can save 5% off their first order by using the code MTGMudsta, and returning shoppers can also use the code GOBLINS5 to save 5% on orders of singles. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest decks. You can use the promo code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order.
And some game review. Fred, how did you do?
Well, it's the first time playing the deck, so not so well, but I still won. No, joke aside, it's just that equipment decks are equipment, but the ability, I completely forgot about it, especially when I had the stack of equipment on it. Yeah, and I should have won right away. I was lucky to survive and do it eventually, but yeah, it's going to take time to master it.
Yeah. There's a cool interaction. That whole upkeep stack was pretty sweet. So.
Yeah.
Max?
I thought I was going to get away with it. And the upkeep and the tricks and everything. I was able to cast my Secret Commander and activate it, but it was not enough to the ever-eternal Excalibur swinging Captain America on crack. So,
is there a lot of trample in red? I feel like you do well with trample in your deck. I played Fred's Black Panther deck. Again, depending on when I post this. This is either the first time you're seeing it, or you saw how badly I did with it, because...
Do the first game first.
Yeah, we'll do that one first. Yeah. Unfortunately, I got a lot of the token X spells, but only the late game, and by that point I hadn't ramped, so all of the doublers, like the Osier Tack, Mondrak, which I had in hand, would have been great, but they were just going to sit on the field and then die. There was never a good opening to be able to resolve any of the kind of stuff, and by that point, I just felt like I was trying to claw my way back in. Ian, you got to live the dream?
I lived the Ristic study dream. That's the best I've ever ristically studied in my life. And you play Andreas Forerunners in this one, and normally that's the end of the game. But
Yeah.
that didn't happen this time.
Yeah, it was weird. Usually,
You were close.
You Ristic study had a drawback here because it was better for me with Vannifar to get things out of my deck, but I had a whole bunch of things in my hand that would have been better off with payoff. So
yeah,
kinda-
it's that weird trade-off.
Is it the right card for that deck?
good question.
Well, he had lethal out of nowhere.
Fair.
Yeah,
But he drew so much to his point, like
Yeah.
that blocked you in a way.
yeah,
Hilariously, yeah.
yeah. It's one of those weird situations where it's like,
Draw no matter what.
And we were not helping. I started at first to pay,
Nobody
but then
the allure of the draw sucked me in.
What's the difference between 20 cards and 40 cards?
nothing.
You drew 20 and you did do a big swing, but
I'd say
then
about half an ounce.
yeah.
Well, that's it. Have a good one.
This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.